to Bringing Jesus to a Broken Heart. On today's show, I have Sally Wagenmaker. She is a partner at Wagenmaker and Oberly, a law firm serving nonprofit organizations across the nation with offices in Chicago and Charleston. She provides legal counsel in corporate, tax, employment, and real estate, including churches and other religious organizations, social services providers, and schools. Her law firm's values include trustworthiness, cost efficiency, creative collaboration, mutual respect, and community engagement, consistent with Proverbs 11:24-25. She also speaks regularly and writes through her law firm's blog, www.wagenmakerlaw.com, on non-for-profit legal topics like board governance, religious liberty considerations, political activities, charitable fundraising, and corporate structuring. She has authored numerous articles on tax-exempt topics, including religious liberty issues, state exemption, governance, and political liberty issues, state exemption, governance, and political advocacy. Sally currently serves as a president of Christian Legal Society and is a member of the Illinois and Georgia. She is thankful for her husband and 2 college-age children, whom remind her continually that we are all made in God's image and are valuable beyond measure. Welcome again, Sally Wagenmaker, to the show. Welcome, Sally.
So much, Rose. It's a pleasure to speak with you, and I'm a great fan of your work. Glad to speak.
And you too, because the reason why I wanted to do this, Sally, that Sally and I connected on a business issue, but I have gotten to know Sally as a fellow colleague, and I was very impressed with working with her. I saw how God uses her as an attorney. So I thought it would be really interesting to do a show that would highlight what her firm does, because if I was impressed and I got some valuable information from her, I would really like to pass that on to the listeners, that if you're someone that needs to reach out to this firm, Sally would be best to explain and the purpose of becoming an attorney. So the first question that I'm going to ask Sally is, what inspired you to be an attorney?
Oh, thank you. That goes way back. I wasn't too inspired, actually, but God was, of course, behind all of it. I had gone to college not really knowing what I would want to do in life, other than I enjoyed music and reading, and as many of us are during our teenage years, had lots of struggles and issues with just trying to figure out life. And so when I was, I believe my junior year, started thinking about law school, and I did not do any kind of research or talk to people. I was actually fairly blind, but I did talk to a law student, and she said it's 3 years. I said forget it, and then it kind of surfaced again later. And so I applied and went straight to law school, and I think really God had a sense of purpose for me that was unbeknownst to me. I like to read. I didn't want to move again. I knew you had to be barred, and so I went to law school quite blind. But then once I got there, I felt like that it really fit me quite well to think about problem solving and how to help people, and to just sort through complicated fact patterns, and a whole way of thinking about justice and God's law and people's law, and so it was enormously exciting and invigorating mentally, stimulating to be around other people who cared about how to make the world a better place, and to think about it from the standpoint of the legal system. So I suppose I took it to it like a fish to water, but I certainly didn't know what I was doing necessarily on the front end.
Okay, well that is a really strong explanation, and I think that for someone who is also a Catholic social worker, I think that it kind of goes hand in hand. And what you're saying is that you want to help people and into a place where you can advocate for them on certain issues. So can you talk a little bit about what are some of the types of cases that you handle in your law firm?
Sure. Yeah, so I think, after law school, I worked in some law firms for a while. I did some legal aid, and then I was home with my kids for about 5 to 7 years, depending on how you look at that. And then I came back into practicing law in 2005 and started working with another attorney who had started a law practice focusing on nonprofit organizations, kind of morphing from the legal aid world to working for a few organizations to really representing a broader range. So we work with hundreds of organizations. That's my great privilege and joy to do that. Many of them are religious and many of them are Christian. And so we work day in and day out with all types of organizations, really from startup to finish. So if somebody comes in and says, we want to start a new entity as a nonprofit, 501c3, then we will help them to think through the corporate development, their kind of gestation before they're officially birthed, and then to apply to the IRS for recognition of their tax-exempt status. And then we help them with operational issues along the way, like employment issues or contracts or intellectual property like trademark and copyright of their creative materials. We also help folks with real estate issues and maybe multi-entity structuring or IRS compliance, and we even help organizations when their season is over to help them die gracefully, so to speak, and dispose of their assets and liability, to address their liabilities in a God-honoring way. And so it's really a lot of fun. Every day is different, and we do work with a lot of organizations, very small or medium or even large, really depending. So, if your church has got a pastor and a couple staff members, then we come alongside issues as they may come along. Or if it's a much larger organization, we can help them too.
And how can someone is contemplating having an organization, do you actually help them with the sort of the layout of it, or it's mostly just the legal perspective of it?
Sure. Well, I think it's really both because, we work with so many organizations. We do have a fair amount of experience just observationally. So we stay in our legal lane. But for example, I ask people sometimes, who are you accountable to? And a lot of people say, well, the IRS. I said, well, yeah, but if you're religious, you're accountable first to the Lord. And then generally speaking, folks, you want to please your donors. For example, the IRS that may say, well, you can't, collect money and use it for too narrow of a purpose or only for, a certain group of people. That's not really a public benefit like you would expect for 501c3. Well, likewise, you're not going to really be able to raise money, to fund only a few people's, whatever their concerns are, to do something that's improper. So we do help people to think through their initial considerations. One is they're both two huge existential questions are, one, should you form a new entity at all, or should you come alongside something that's already started and join that effort? And then two, well, what will be your economic engine? In other words, if you're going to have a homeless shelter, you're going to rely probably on donations, and that's classic 501c3, and that's very easy from a legal standpoint in terms of justifying that for tax-exempt status. But if you're going to do something more complicated where you're going to get payments from people, maybe people pay money for classes, or you're providing counseling services, or other things where it might be appropriate and fair to charge some money, well, then we have to really address and understand how is this different qualitatively that makes it a 501c3 kind of activity. Like if you're going to create art and sell it, well, that's a business. But if you're going to help inner city kids to express themselves, work out anger, learn creative talents, and do their art, and maybe sell a little bit here and there, that's quite a different animal. So we help people to kind of think through those issues, as well as things like governance and leadership and really just how to run an organization. So it's really, a lot of fun to think through what it means to have an up and running nonprofit as opposed to running a business, or as opposed to just doing something, as your own kind of effort, as your own personal ministry.
Well, again, I can't stress enough that's a lot of knowledge, and especially for social workers and Catholic social workers that may be thinking of forming an organization, whether it's working for children, working with the homeless. I think that this is a great resource for all of us is how do we combine our faith and our profession? How do we combine, even for social workers, how do we combine the clinical with practice, and how do professional, and also we feel like we're guided by God in our work, because a lot of this work is of God. That's what Jesus's ministry was, right? And he was in ministry. He just met the needs of the people, and everyone he touched was changed in some way. So we hope that in our professions that we can emulate that, and any person that comes across us during the day, whether it is an outward expression, or it's just because we're just doing what God wants to do, we don't have to say a word, but just be those loving hands and feet of Christ to bring that about. So Sally, can you talk about what it feels like for you to be a Christian woman and a professional, and how do you see that in your workday?
Right. So, being a Christian and a professional, I'd love to respond to that. I just want to touch a little bit, too, on what you said earlier about Jesus as a role model. And I was reminded from my sermon this past week at church that the pastor spoke about Jesus as a philanthropist. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And he was speaking really about stewardship of money, and how, Jesus rebuked the rich young ruler. He was very kind and affirming of Zacchaeus, the tax collector, and then of course, Ananias and Sapphira didn't go too well for them, for not, for withholding from God. And so, there's these so many examples in the Bible about money, and really, your resources more broadly, and how, we're really called to follow Jesus in the sense of surrendering all. Kind of the question is, how much do we give to God? Well, we give him all. And how much does God want from us, or which parts of his, does he want from us? Well, that's really something, to be responsive to and to be prayerful. And so I think that does tie in this question, being a Christian and a professional as an attorney. I worked for several years in a very secular environment, and that was challenging in its own ways, but I sure learned a lot. In other words, we're not all called to do work that's a ministry per se. We have ministries, whether it's sweeping the floor or changing diapers or being the head of a church or something like that. And so God calls us in different ways, but to always be mindful of how we use our resources and for what. So in our firm, we want to be mindful of how we treat each other as staff and handle projects. I often talk to my clients about having integrity. And integrity, the word itself, means that it's integrated, that the parts fit together. So if it's a religious client, or otherwise obviously moral, I think most of mine are, or if not all, I speak on the level of, okay, well, who do you serve? And wanting to have integrity that way. But then also, if you tell the IRS one thing, but you tell your donors another, and they're very different, parts aren't going to fit together, and one way or another, it's not going to go well for you. It's just a good practical advice to have integrity in all that you do, and to be consistent with that. And that comes up quite a bit. And I'm not sure if you want me to address other things about being professional, but those are some things that come to mind.
Well, I think that's a really good point as well, because for social work ethics, integrity is one of our largest component and characteristic that we should uphold, that integrity. And especially if we are putting ourselves in the category of being a Christian professional. And that means that we have to be able to uphold, and also the way we treat other people within our own organizations, with the most utmost respect. And that's where it comes out. Like, if we don't do it within, it's very hard to do it without, and then reach the world with that message. So because we do lead, there's a saying that goes, we lead by example, right? And that means, how we treat the people that work with us, how we treat our coworkers, how we interact every day, and how mostly and most important is, how did we show Jesus today in our work? How did we model him, and how did we show the world what it means to be a Christian professional? Because that's how the world views Christianity, right? If we're not doing it, then why would they want to join us? So that's what we have to, I think that's part of a big message, and I think that's what's so beautiful about having a woman like such as yourself, who's a mother, who's a wife, who's a professional, sought the Lord first in all things. So I think I would like to end with this, that if you are someone who is wanting to be a Catholic social worker, or if there's someone who needs to be in touch with Sally Wagenmaker's law firm and is thinking about, well, I'd like to start something, or I have a vision, pray about it. Pray about where God is going to lead you in this work that we desperately need now, to bring this message across. And you can definitely reach out to Sally, and her number is, Sally, would you like to give all your contact information?
Sure. It's Sally, Sally, at wagenmakerlaw.com, and Wagenmaker Law is W-A-G as in George, E as in Edward, N as in Nancy, M-A-K-E-R, law.com.
Okay. Well, I think that will definitely end today's show, but it doesn't end the work that Sally does, or does anyone else that really wants to do some work for the Lord. So keep in mind your position that God has for you in the little corner of the world where you are. Pray to Him every day. Open your heart to Jesus and be that wonderful vessel to be used, to be worked by Him. And I just want to leave you, just remember, Jesus always brings healing to the broken heart. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. And stay tuned for our other shows, and God bless you.